Shalom Aleichem and welcome back everyone to our Thursday night class. Baruch Hashem, Shabbat is coming very soon. And this week being Shabbat Parashat, it's two Parashot this week, Parashat Matot and Parashat Masei. This week we catch up to Eretz Yisrael, that's correct. Eretz Yisrael, they were always a week ahead of us, okay? Because of the way the Yom Tovim fell out, we still had Yom Tov and it was already Shabbat by them. So we've been a Parshat behind all this time. Be'ezrat Hashem, this Shabbat, we are catching up to Eretz Yisrael. That's saying a lot.
So why we couldn't read two parashot in the beginning, the first week after the holiday?
Very good. Why didn't we? You could have did Chukat Balak. We could have did these other connections. But that's the way we have it. Why is a good question. I have to look into it. But that's the way we have it. That the Parshat Matot-Masei is when we catch up. There are some years that we do Chukat Balak. We do combine those two. But that wasn't the scenario this year. So let's take a look at Parashat Matot first, and then we'll go into Parshat Masei. In Parashat Matot, we start off with the halacha, the laws of neder, nidarim. What's neder? Promises, vows. When a person makes a vow. So we know that Torah gives us 613 mitzvot. Nidarim is when a person decides to do something extra for himself. For example, everyone is allowed to drink coffee. There's no issur in drinking coffee on days that you're allowed to eat and drink. If a person decided that he wanted to be holy for Hashem, and he wanted, for whatever reason, to stay away from coffee, he would say a couple of words, and those words will now create an issur for him or her to not be able to drink any more coffee. So we see from here a very special yesod. We see that words are very powerful. Just by expressing that the coffee will become prohibited to me, I have now created a prohibition. I've created an issur that I cannot drink coffee. Why do words have such a huge impact? You know, the Torah says here, whatever a person says, whatever comes out of his mouth, right? Whatever comes out, he should not profane his words. The person has to be a man of his word. Everything that he says, he has to do. Right? You're going to meet a lot of people in this world. They're going to promise you A to Z. Right? Everything in between. And then when it comes time to actually do it, they're not there. I always say, famously, when I was looking for a job, and everybody knew I was going to nursing school at that time, and people came over to me and says, when you finish, see me, talk to me, I'll make sure you have this, you have that, you have everything's going to be fine. I finish, I go back to these people, they say, what are you talking about? We never told you anything. It's not, leave us alone. So it tells us, the Parashat says, you can't be that way. Whatever you say from your mouth, you have to be very careful what comes out of your mouth. We see that the mouth has the ability to make an issur. The mouth has the ability to do something. Think about it. Shabbat Kodesh. Shabbat in the summer starts technically, right, 8 something, right, 8 o'clock, whatever it was. We come to the shul and we take Shabbat in early. We say L'chad Dodi, we say Mizmor L'Shir Yom Shabbat. Already at that time we're taking in Shabbat. That's it. Even though it's not Shabbat because the sun hasn't set yet, but it's Shabbat for us because we decided that it was going to be Shabbat. With our saying Mekadesh Shabbat, well, us taking in the Shabbat early, we've created that Shabbat comes in early. That means we have the ability with our words to do something huge. We have to understand why that is. First thing to know is, how did Hashem create the world? What does the Torah says?
Bereshit.
Right? He said, Bereshit bara Elokim. Hashem said in the beginning, I'm going to create. And he said, Vayhi or, there should be light. Psukim goes through, Pirkei Avos tells Hashem created the world with 10 utterances. Hashem spoke 10 times, and the world was created. So how was the world created? With?
Mouth.
Speech. Hashem doesn't have a mouth, but whatever this means is that Hashem spoke. He said words. Whatever, how we understand that, the world was created with words. That already tells us how important it is, words. Words can create. You know, there's a popular English saying that says, 6 sticks and stones can break my bones. How does it continue? But words can never hurt me. You ever heard this one? Okay, so now you heard it. 6 and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. That's someone who wants to say that, physical damage is one type of damage, but verbal damage is something that doesn't really matter. But the truth is, Shlomo HaMelech tells us, the Hayim u'Mavet, the life and death, is b'yad halashon, is in the hand of the mouth. The truth is, there are many people that they get beaten up. But from physical hurt, your body will heal. You'll be fine. But from verbal abuse, a person who takes verbal abuse, that sometimes is unable to be healed from. How does a person go into a marriage? The husband and the wife, or at that point, they're not husband and wife yet. The fiancé, the groom, and the bride are under the chuppah, under the canopy, right? How does the hatan, how does the domot take the kilin to be his wife? He says words. Harei at mekudeshet li b'tabat zu kedat Moshe v'Yisrael. Then he puts the ring on her, and that's it. How did he mekadesh her? Through words. Through words. It's no secret why marriage goes through words. You know why marriage starts off with words? Because marriage continues with words. Because if you don't speak, you don't have a communication of a relationship in marriage, you don't have anything.
It's like the story with the water.
That's right. If you don't talk, sometimes that's good. But you need to talk something in marriage. You have to know when not to talk and when to talk. A hurtful word in a relationship can destroy a relationship. The positive word, just like Hashem created the world with words, a person creates relationships with words. And words can be very impactful. And sometimes if you say a word and afterwards you say I'm sorry, then I'm sorry counts. But the hurt that happened through the words are still there. Like we said many times, the mashal of the person that every time he got angry, he put a nail into the wood, right? And then finally when he started to calm down, he removed all the nails. And what did he see in that piece of wood? There were still holes. The nails are not there anymore. But the hurt that happened via those angry words or those hurtful words are there forever. We see how important it is for a person to be careful with his words. The Gemara Masechet Shabbat tells us something very interesting. It says, Ba'avon nidarim, because of the sin of a person making with vows, a person made a vow and he didn't fulfill his vow. He said, for example, I'm going to donate money to X, Y, and Z, whatever organization, for whatever cause, and then he doesn't fulfill it. It says over there, Ba'avon nidarim, meta isha shel adam. Hashem takes away a person's wife. A person will lose his wife because of a promise that he made. The pasuk in Proverbs in Mishlei says, Shlomo HaMelech. There's an amazing story, a true story that happened. The story was said over by the Baba Rebbe when he had a few domots, a few hatanim came to him, and he wanted to teach them about Shalom Bayit, what it means to have peace in the house. He says there was once a great Rebbe, the Rebbe of Kamara, and the Rebbe of Kamara came to a certain city. He was traveling, and he came there, and like every good Hasid, every good righteous pious Jew, he woke up in the morning and he said to them, "Where's the mikvah? I want to go to the mikvah before I pray shaharit." So they told him, "We're sorry, Rebbe, but in this city there is no mikvah." He says, "What do you mean there's no mikvah here? How could it be? What do the women do? The women have to go to mikvah midoraita, from the Torah they have to go. What do? We don't have. They have to travel outside the city about a half hour, 45 minutes to go to the mikvah." So he says, maybe that's why I'm here in this city. Maybe I'm here in the city to establish a mikvah. He says to them, "Is there any rich people here that can have the money to build a mikvah?" And they tell to the Rebbe, there's one rich man here. He can afford to build a whole mikvah overnight. That's how much money he has. He says, okay, I'm going to see him. He says, no, Rebbe, I will tell him, Rebbe, don't go there. There's Yanot, it's going to be very embarrassing. Don't go to him. Why not? This rich man, he's a kamtzan. This rich man, he's a miser. He doesn't give money to anybody. You're going to go there, he's going to embarrass you. Don't go to him. The Rebbe says, I have to try. So the Rebbe travels, and he goes to this rich man's house. Now, this rich man, he didn't become a rich man because he doesn't know anything. He knows a special person when he sees him. The rich man sees this Rebbe. He opens up the doors, the gates. It's a whole, like a whole mansion. You go through the gates, the whole road. He comes on top. There's big mahogany doors. It opens up. The house is all marble, beautiful lighting. Everything's amazing. It's like you walked into the most richest house you can in that whole city. And he comes in, and the Rebbe sees him, and the rich man walks over to the Rebbe and says, Rebbe, I see you're a world-class rabbi. I see you're a holy man. But Rebbe, before you come to visit me, before we go in and talk, I want to make it very clear to you. I have a minhag, I have a custom that I don't give tzedakah. Our minhag in my family is that we keep the money in the house. We keep it in the family. We don't send the money out. So if you came for money, you should leave right now. It's not going to happen. The Rebbe says to him, I didn't come for money. I heard you're the rich man, and I wanted to pay you a visit. And as a Rebbe, I have the power to give out berachot, blessings. I wanted to see what a rich man like you would need. What type of blessing you would ask. I was interested, intrigued, so I came to visit you. The rich man says, Rebbe, come inside. Takes him to the study, sits him down, brings him cake, teas, drinks. He says, Rebbe, listen, I heard good things about you. I know you're a big Rebbe, you can give blessings. So I have one request for you. One berachah that I really want, which I can't do on my own, with all my money. His servant says, okay, sure. What is it that you need? He says to the Rebbe, I want you to give me a bracha that my wife will die. I want you to give me a blessing to kill my wife. The Rebbe says to him, rabbis are really not in the business of giving out curses, He says, Rebbe, you're backing out now? You told me you have powerful blessings. This is the blessing that I need. Can you do it? The Rebbe said, listen, I can't give her a blessing to kill her, but I can give you an etzah, I can give you an advice. It says in Masechta Shabbat, Daf Lamed Bet Amud Bet, it says there, like we mentioned, that because of the sins of a vow that a person does, and he doesn't pay, his wife gets killed. So I have an idea for you. Go and make a vow in public and say, without, that you're not making a bli neder. It's not going to be without a vow. You're making a vow that cannot be revoked. It has to stay. And this way, then don't fulfill it. And this way, your wife will die. That's my etzah to you. My advice to you. He says, Rebbe, you have a suggestion? What should I vow? I want it to be powerful. I want it to be a big vow that it's going to work and my wife will die. So the Rebbe says, I actually have a suggestion. In the city, they're trying to raise money for a mikvah. Go to shul this Shabbat. Go there. Tell them you have an announcement. Get up and say you're making a neder that can never be revoked. And you're going to build the whole mikvah yourself. All the money is going to come from you. No one else. Make that vow. And then don't pay it. I guarantee you, according to what our Torah tells us, your wife is going to die. So he says, Rebbe, this is why you're a world-class rabbi. This is why you're a rabbi. You're a smart man. You know what to do. He shakes, and Shalom Yisrael. The Rebbe leaves. The Rebbe stays in town for Shabbat. This rich man goes to shul. After the Sefer Torah, he walks over to the rabbi. He says, listen, I have an announcement to make. Now, the Rav of the shul, the Rebbe already spoke to him and said, what's going on? So the Rebbe said, of course. And the rich man gets up in front of the whole kehillah, hundreds of people sitting in the synagogue, and he gets up and he says, Rabotai, I'm donating the mikvah to this community. Everything by me, all expenses paid. Everybody was like, shh. He says, I'm making a neder that can never be revoked. I'm making a vow that can never be nullified. I promise to build the mikvah. I'm going to finance everything. Everybody, he goes home. Motzei Shabbat, they send two gabbais, two treasurers of the shul, to go to the rich man's house, start talking about the payments and stuff like that. Payment plan, how is he going to do it, how they plan to do it. The two treasurers come to the guy's house, and they ring the bells, right? And the rich man says, "What are you here for?" They say, "We're here to, talk about the mikvah, the plan, everything." He says, "If you don't leave right now, I'm going to send my attack dogs after you." He says, "But you promised." He says, "I promised and I lied. I'm not giving a penny. Get out of here right now." These two people left. They came back to the city. Everybody was, "Wow, how can he do this? Lying, he promised." A week goes by, 2 weeks go by, and the Rebbe is still in that city. He's playing it out to see what's going on. 3 weeks, and the rich man now comes to visit the Rebbe. He comes in, he barges in, he says, "Rebbe, I thought you were a smart man. My wife, it's been 3 weeks since I made the vow, and she's so healthy, it's disgusting how healthy she is. She doesn't even have a sniffle, nothing. I thought she'd be dead by now, only she'd be really sick. Rebbe, your advice is not working." The Rebbe says, "Let me ask you, right now, what's your relationship with your wife?" He says, "Now you're asking me?" He says, "No, tell me what it's like." He says, "Rebbe, my wife and me, I come home, I scream at her, she screams at me. We throw plates at each other. We throw all these things flying out houses. Every minute we have to repair it because we're in such a fight all the time." The Rebbe says, "You see, when you do this, is the windows open? Do your neighbors hear it?" He says, "Of course, everybody knows. Me and my wife hate each other." He says, "Well, that's why your wife's not dying. Chachamim tell us if you embarrass somebody, and if their face becomes red or face becomes white, right? Either blood rushes in or the blood goes away from that face. It's as if you killed that person. So she's already dying every time you embarrass her. That's why she's not really dying. If you want her to really die, then you have to be nice to her. Be nice to her. Nice to my wife." He says, "You want her dead?" He says, "Yeah." So then you got to invest. Be nice to her. Buy her some presents. Talk to her nicely. And then you're going to see how she's going to die. She's your wife, and you're not killing her anymore. In that sense, so she'll really die. He says, "Rebbe, you're good. You're good. It's hard, but it's an investment. I want it. I'm going to do it." So he goes to the flower shop. He buys chocolate. He walks home. He says, "Honey, here's flowers. Here's chocolate." She says, "What's this?" "I love you. You're so nice. You're so good." And he starts being nice to her. She starts being nice to him. All of a sudden, within a week or two, there's no more screaming, no more plates and things flying all over the place, but rather they're two nice people getting along. And then she gets sick. Started with a sneeze, a cold, and then she got sick with a fever. And before you know it, the doctors are saying she's going to die. The man runs to the Rebbe. He says, Rebbe, I don't want her to die anymore. You got to cancel it. We got to cancel it. And the Rebbe says, what do you mean? He says, Rebbe, really, I don't know, the past 2 weeks, my wife has been really nice. And I don't want her to die anymore. So he says to him, there's no way out. We had a deal. You wanted to invest. He says, Rebbe, I need to cancel it now. The Rebbe says, there's only one way. There's only one way you can get out of it. You have to keep your vow. You have to build a mikvah. He says, Rebbe, that's so much money. I never meant to do it. The Rebbe says, I don't know. It's your choice now. Mikvah or your wife dies. He says, Rebbe, please, something else. The Rebbe says, that's it. So he goes, he runs to the treasurers, and he takes out his money. He writes a check for the whole thing. He gives it to them. And within minutes, his wife started to get way better. And Baruch Hashem, she survived. We see over here the effect of a vow, but we also see a big relationship advice. Relationships is really a two-way street. Relationships are a two-way street. Relationship with anyone, with your parents, with your spouse, with your siblings, with everyone is a two-way street. What this means is, sometimes we get into a certain state that we're not happy with each other. But the truth is that if we start being nice to one another, then all of a sudden, you're going to see how the relationship is going to improve. I remember there were people who wanted to get married, so they would go to a certain Kabbalist. And the Kabbalist would look up their names and say, works, doesn't work. And there was one such rabbi in Eretz Yisrael that was telling people not only not to get married, he was telling married people that they have to separate because their names don't add up. But Mordechai Eliyahu went to this man who was saying this and said to him, let me check your and your wife's name. How many people you're telling to divorce and separate because the names don't work out? Let's check your name. And Mordechai Eliyahu uses the way he calculates names to check this guy's name, this rabbi's name, and him and his wife don't add up. He tells the rabbi, the Mordechai tells him you have to separate. He says, what do you mean? I have 9 children. He says, so why are you telling other people? I know a couple that before they got married, they went to Mordechai Eliyahu and they asked him, do we match? And Mordechai Eliyahu asked them, you like each other? You think you're good for each other? Are you willing to work on your marriage with one another? You're willing to talk and figure things out? Then you're ready to get married. Then your marriage will be blessed. That's any relationship. Every relationship requires 2 people to work it out, to talk it through, to work with one another. And this is what we learn from this topic of Nidarim. One of the lessons that we learn from the importance of words, communication, and how not to take words for granted. We're going to move on to another topic from this week's Parshat. We're going into our second topic and our second Parshat. It says over here, Matot-Masei b'nei Yisrael. These are the travels, the journeys of Bnei Israel. And it goes through 42 stations of how the Jews traveled from Egypt to where they were at this point, right before entering Eretz Yisrael. And it says, V'yichtov Moshe et motzeihem l'maseihem al pi Hashem. And Moshe wrote their going forth according to the journeys at the bidding of Hashem. The Rambam tells us something very important. Moshe recorded these journeys because in this way the Jewish people would remember the miraculous events which happened in the Midbar. Some of these miracles were very, very clear. The Anani HaKavod, the clouds that dry cleaned their clothing, the protection, the light, the night, the manna, all the times that things happened to them throughout the Midbar. In order to remember everything, you have to have them written down. Why? People come right away and say it never happened. Here, how many years after World War II, after the Holocaust, and how many people in the world deny that ever there was a Holocaust, that Jews were ever murdered, mass murdered? They deny it all, as if it never happened. So number one, in order to make sure that people don't say it never happened. And even if it did occur, sometimes people will start to change the facts. The manna wasn't actually manna. The anani kavod wasn't actually anani kavod. It was a physical, it was this, it was that. So in order to remember everything, you have to remember and you have to write down the way it is. There is another very important lesson here. The lesson is that every stop in life is part of life's journey. Life is really a journey. Is that you're traveling from station to station. We have, Chazal tell us, Rabbi Yossi was traveling and he went into a churva, he went into a ruin to pray. So Eliyahu Navi came to see him, and Eliyahu Navi was waiting outside the ruin. And Eliyahu Navi said to him, Rabbi Yossi, why did you go into the ruin to daven? Why didn't you pray on the road? You know, the ruin is a little bit, it's dangerous to go in there. It can fall on you, whatever it is. And Rabbi Yossi said to him, I was worried about the ovrei dirachim, the passerbys who pass on the roads. You know, they're going to bother him praying. They're all going to try to move him. Rav Pinto says, why does it say over there, ovrei derachim, passerbys? There's another thing that we use when we say people traveling on the road. We say hochei derachim, people who are going along the road. Why would you use ovrei derachim versus hochei derachim? So Rav Pinto, he explains that the famous story. There was a man named Isaac. Isaac was a Jew, and he had a dream that every night his father came to him and told him, go to Prague, and in Prague, under the bridge, there is a treasure if you dig. Dig in a certain spot, you'll find treasure. He ignored the dream for a long time, and finally he listened to his father. He went there, he starts to dig, and the guards see him and say, hey, what are you doing? He says, oh, I'm sorry. He says, what are you doing here?
There's gold here.
He says, my father came to me in a dream and told me that there's gold here and I'm looking. And the guard starts to laugh and says to him, he says, you think you're going to find gold here? I had a dream that there's a Jew in the city of Kharkov named Isaac, and under his oven there's a treasure of gold. Now Isaac from Kharkov is this Jew. He right away says, I'm sorry. He runs back home and moves his oven, digs underneath, and he finds a treasure chest full of gold. So now, the travel to Prague, from Kharkov to Prague, which was an expensive travel, it was time-consuming, was it beneficial to Isaac or not? Okay. It is, right? In the end, he found a treasure chest. But people look at it differently. Some people will look, I wasted my time. I should have just opened under the oven. But some people realize that the journey itself
Helps.
is part of it. That's why Rabbi Yossi said, I'm worried about Ovrei Derachim, the passerby, the people who are just trying to go from point A to point B, and they don't care about the journey. All they care about is getting to their destination. But there are some people who realize that it's not just the destination, but rather the journey, the whole journey, all 42 stops of life are all important. Because if you go somewhere, you don't know what you're going to find out. The people who appreciate the journeys don't get upset if someone stopped on the road to daven. They'll just go around it. Listen to this. Listen to this beautiful story. Moti was a Jewish man, a businessman. He was in the carpeting business, and his business wasn't working out so well. And one day he's having to travel from Manhattan to Brooklyn to Manhattan, and he's taking the bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge, and he gets stuck. Massive rain, traffic is crazy, and as he's traveling, he sees a car on the side of the road that stopped. This is before the advent of cell phones. And he sees the cars on the road stop, everyone passing by. And as a Jew, he feels bad for him, so he stops. He sees the guy, and he says to the guy, everything okay? What's the trouble? He says, I don't know. I took a company car, and my car stopped. So Mati goes, he checks the car. This is before Chavein, before all these things. Checks the car, and he realizes that all the car is missing is a little bit of gas. So he siphons some gas from his tank, and he puts the gas inside the other tank. And this guy's like, wow, thank you so much. He says to him, listen, here's my business card. Call me tomorrow. I really appreciate it. Mati forgets about the business card. Mati continues his life. The next day, doesn't call him. 2 days, 3 days. He's trying to do his business. It's not working. He feels bad. He's going through his pockets, and he finds a business card. He pulls out the business card, and he calls this man. And this man says to him, listen, first of all, the secretary answered, and then finally he gets to the businessman. The business says, listen, you told me you work in carpeting. I'm in construction, and I just finished a project in Manhattan, a 45-story building, all office space, and they're looking to carpet the place. They were going to hire somebody, but I told them I have a very good man for the job. If you want it, the contract's yours. There he was, thinking he wasted his time on the road, and nothing was working out. But meanwhile, HaKadosh Baruch Hu set into motion for him to get a 45-story business building in Manhattan that he was going to carpet. You know how much money that he was just going to make right there? And the contract was already his. Didn't have to vie for anything. Hashem sometimes sets up things in a certain way for people to be at a certain place at a certain time. That's why don't fight it. If you ended up being late, if you ended up being there, you ended up taking up time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has everything set up for a person to be where he needs to be at the time that he needs to be. Rav Azariah was a son of the Holocaust survivors. He lived in Eretz Yisrael. At some point, he developed a problem with his eyes. He needed eye surgery. And the surgeon for the job lived in Berlin. He wasn't so excited to go back to Germany He spoke to his rabbis and they said, listen, for medical reasons, the best doctor's there, you can go. So he decided he was going to go, but he's going to look like a real Jew. So he went in his Shabbat, hat and jacket, everything, tzitzit sticking out. And while he was there, he was shopping in the grocery store for some groceries. And a priest walks over to him and says, are you a rabbi? He says, yes. He says, the law here in Berlin is that if a body is in the morgue for 72 hours, we have to cremate the body, we have to burn it. He says, we have a Jew, and today will become 72 hours. We didn't have no family for him. But now that I saw you, maybe you can figure out what to do with the body. I know according to Judaism, you're not supposed to burn the body, so if you want, you can figure it out. And Rabbi Zariah goes, he ascertains that this guy was actually a Jew, and he figured out funeral arrangements for him. Rabbi Zariah says, I realized that me coming to Berlin wasn't for my surgery, but rather I came to give a proper burial to another Jew. We'll say one more story on this topic. There was a story with the great Rosh Yeshiva of Mordechai Gifter, Zecher Tzadik Libracha. He was supposed to go on a plane together with a number of students from Chicago to Baltimore, right? So from Telz, Cleveland to Baltimore. And they were supposed to go to take the flight to go to the wedding. They get to the airport, and there's delay after delay after delay. And it looks like in the end that their flight was being canceled. Knew it was getting late in the day, and the Rosh Yeshiva said, if we're going to leave, we're not going to get back in time to the yeshiva for mincha. So let's daven mincha here. They were going, or I didn't want to daven in the main terminal, so they went over to one of the people working there, maintenance people, and they said, is there a room that we can pray in for a few minutes? And this maintenance worker walks over and says, yeah, we have one. He opens the door, and they daven mincha there. And as they're about to leave, this maintenance man who was staying there the whole time with them, says to them, listen, can you help me say Kaddish? They say, you're Jewish? He says, I am. My mother's Jewish, my father's Jewish, but they lived assimilated Jews. They never were really Shomei Torah. But he said, last night, my father passed away a week ago. But he says, last night, my father came to me in a dream and said, I have to say Kaddish for him. And I didn't know how to say Kaddish. So I told my father in the dream, I don't know how to, and I don't know where to say it. So he said to me, my father in my dream told me that he's going to send a minion to me. And he says, and here you are. So it must be that you guys are here for this minyan. So Rosh Yeshiva taught him how to say Kaddish. Right there, he said Kaddish after the tefillah. Rosh Yeshiva then turned to his students and said, we thought we were going to a wedding, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't want us to go to a wedding. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent us to make a minyan for this man. Do you understand? What it means that Hashem sends us on life and our journey of life to certain places for us to be there at that time for a reason that we may not agree with. But it's there because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be there. Every single journey is very, very important. We're going to end off with one more lesson on this week's Parashah. We have in this week's Parashah an interesting concept known as the Arei Miklat. Right, this is Parshat-Masei. The Arei Miklat. What's the Arei Miklat? There's a city of refuge. To make it very simple, if Chas v'Shalom, someone killed somebody by accident, it was an unintentional murder. Now it's not a complete accident, meaning that it was an accident, but if he was a little more careful, it wouldn't have happened. Right? If it's a complete accident out of his control, he does not have to go to the city of refuge. Right? But if it's an accident, then he does go to the city of refuge. And if it was done on purpose, then he has to be killed, as the halacha is. Right? So, the city of refuge, the people who killed unintentionally go there. There were 6 of them in Eretz Yisrael. 3 of them in Eretz Yisrael proper, and 3 of them in the Transjordan, in the Ever HaYarden. Right? Shevet Ruvain, God, right? Who was it? Ruvain? Who were the 3 Shvatim that wanted to? God, and half of Menashe, right? Reuven, Gad, Mechati, Shevet, Menashe live in the Ever HaYarden. So you have 3 in Eretz Yisrael and 3 in the Ever HaYarden. The Gemara asks a question. How does that make any sense? You have 6 of them, and 3 of them on the Ever HaYarden. 3 of them are for 3 Shvatim, while the other 3 is for the other 9 Shvatim. Would you set it up that way? No, I would make it put one, maybe two in the Ever HaYarden, and the rest of them on the other side. So the Maharal explains, because there was more intentional murders, homicides, that happened in the Ever HaYarden, in the Transjordan, the sanctity of life, lost its value. Understand? Because people were killing people in the Ever HaYarden for whatever reason, there were more murders happening there. People lost the value of what it means to have a life, what it means, the value of life. Rav Pam explains as follows: when you have a violence-saturated society, it has many ripple effects. When people don't value life, they lose the value of life. He says, for example, unfortunately, we hear much violence that happens in Eretz Yisrael. And we hear there was a terrorist that rammed into a soldier, or there was a stabbing attack and 3 people died. Or they say only 2 people died. And people don't feel that bad. They say it's only 2 people. Only 1 person. It wasn't a whole bus load. Like it used to be where they used to kill a whole bus. Blow up a whole bus in Eretz Yisrael. And so people say one life, 2 lives. But Pam says, why do people say it was only 1, only 2? Chas Shalom, even 1 life is already so valuable. How could a person say it was only 1? Now obviously we should be grateful that there wasn't more. But we need to feel the sorrow of even 1 person losing his life.
Feel bad.
But what happens is when you're in a society where life is cheapened, it's not considered anything, that will cause people to not care about life. When violence is going on, hey, look today in our society. Violence, people committing violent crimes, and yet the bail system just let them right out. Right? They just let them right back out on the streets. Because people don't care about violence. It happens so much that it's already becoming part of the normal. Not only that, the scientists have proven that all these shooters that we hear about, all these shooters that go places, part of the problem is because these young men watch movies and television shows where shooting is glorified. And they watch again and again and again how there's some good guy, or someone does something bad to them, something happens, and they decide to go on violence and retaliation and then vengeance, and they go and they kill everybody. And they show how these heroes are, with guns shooting and people are dying, and the way they show it, blood and everything, makes it so enticing. You have all these video games where people are going and shooting things up, and they make it very realistic. I'm not saying you have to ban all these things, but I'm saying that living in such a society where these things are there, it makes people feel less when they deal with death. An example, you have medical professionals who deal with death all the time. And you'll see, I talk for myself. The first time I experienced somebody dying on me, it was very, very difficult. But as time went by, you have to function at your work, you develop a little bit of a coldness. It doesn't bother you as much that a life is no longer. And this is what Rav Pam tells us what happened on the Ever HaYarden. Because people were killing people, so they already didn't even care about unintentionally killing people. Accidents would happen more because people weren't careful to try to protect life. There is a famous author, a Geisha author. His name is Mark Twain. You might have heard of Mark Twain. You'll hear about him if you didn't hear about him yet, as you continue your schooling. And Mark Twain wrote an interesting novel by the name Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. And in this book, he writes how a man from the 1800s, and the 1850s, 1860s, Hank Morgan, something happened to him and he got knocked out, and he finds himself coming back to the times of King Arthur. You know King Arthur? You heard of King Arthur? He was a king way back in the day. There was the magician Merlin and all that. So he finds himself back, what was it, 13th century? in Europe and in England, right? And he finds himself back over there, and it's like he time traveled, right? And he gets back there, and he sees the way people are treating him, how the king just kills people left and right. Eventually, he makes himself to be an important person there, and he tries to save people. He tells the king, don't kill this person, don't kill this person. But as you read the book, you'll see that all of a sudden this man, Hank Morgan, as time goes by, he himself doesn't even mind that the king is killing people for no reason. Because when a person lives in a certain society and people are doing certain things, they themselves become used to that. They themselves think, hey, it's not so bad, everybody's doing it. When you're in a society that does such a thing, you also feel that. You become part of that. That's why when we live amongst Goyim, we sometimes take their values to us as well. That's something we be very careful with, because we have Jewish values that we have to keep. We cannot take their values. But when you live amongst them and you see them and you think they're right, and it's okay, we cheapen our values, we become having a problem like that. Now that explains why the Arei Miklat, where were the 6 Arei Miklat, where were they situated? Where were they? They were in the cities of Levi'im. There were a total of 42 cities of Levi'im, plus the 6 Arei Miklat. The Levi'im lived there. Why would you send the people who killed unintentionally to where Levi'im lived? Why would you want the Levi'im to live with people who killed? Not only that, they're there until the Kohen Gadol dies. And the mother of the Kohen Gadol would come and feed them, give them clothing. What was all that about? So the Mefarshim explained. It's because when we send this guy who killed unintentionally, we're not sending him to go to jail. We're sending him to be fixed, to go to rehab. And how does he go to rehab? When he goes to Levi'im. Who were Levi'im? Who were the Levi'im? They were teachers of Klal Yisrael. They loved everybody. They were the nicest people on earth. You sent the unintentional murderer to the Levi'im. So what do they see? They see how to behave better. They see how to act better. The Kohen Gadol's mom shows them, I'm a stranger to you, but I'll give you food. I'll give you clothing. I'll keep you alive. I'll help you. When these murderers saw this, they said, see how careful you have to be with another life. See how much you have to love someone else. And they would change their lives as well. We'll end off with our last story for this week. Rabbi Aryeh Levin, Tzadik L'Bracha, he used to visit the Jewish inmates who were in the prison, in the British rule, in the what was then Palestine, right? Before Israel's statehood. And there were Jewish prisoners that were captured by the British. And every Shabbat he would come to visit them. He would pray with them in everything. And once in one of the Shabbat services of Aryeh Levin, a messenger came and told him he has to leave right away. He comes home and he finds out that his daughter is paralyzed. She's very sick. And he was there. He supported his family, but his daughter was very sick, and they say she's going to die. The next Shabbat, Aryeh Levin goes back to the prisoners, and he's praying with them as normal. And he gets up to the Sefer Torah, and the first prisoner goes up for an aliyah, and afterwards he says, I want to make a donation. Usually they would give a coin or something. The prisoner says, I want to donate a year of my life to your daughter. And so it was, each prisoner went up for the aliyah, each one donated some time of his life to Reb Aryeh Levin's daughter. Reb Aryeh Levin was sitting there and crying, broke down, and he wept. And as miraculous as it may sound, that Saturday night, Reb Aryeh's daughter began to move, and with days she was fully recovered. But why was Reb Aryeh Levin crying? He says, here, look, these people were rehab. They got rehab. They fixed themselves. They saw a rabbi who cared for them every single week who came, and they started to care for others as well. They saw what it means to live like a holy person. And when they saw that in their community, it rubbed against them as well. When they saw the Kohen Gadol's mother distribute food, talk to them, give them what they need, they saw how a total stranger, despite her great esteem, would make sure that the needs in the city of refuge were cared for. After developing an awareness of life, they were very careful not to daven for the Kohen Gadol to die. so they can get out. They were also careful to make sure that they were going to be kinder and gentler people. We see how important what it means to live in a proper society. For the truth is, we are a product of our environment. When we live amongst good people, we end up being good people. You live amongst bad people, you end up being bad people. A person who lives in a place that is considered bad, he has to seclude himself, the Rambam says. He can't go out. He has to live in isolation. We, Baruch Hashem, live in good communities. You have the opportunity to move, make sure you move to a good community. Get yourself surrounded by good people, because who you surround yourself ends up being who you are. So, Matai, just to review the 3 lessons that we learned from this week's Parashah. Number 1, we learned the lesson, the power of words, and especially words in a relationship. We also learned what it means to take the journeys of life. Each step of life is important. And we finally learned what it means to be in a proper community, amongst proper people, and that will help us live a proper life. And with this, I'd love to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Toda Rabah.